Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR Podcast, home of the Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet, which you can get at racefortheprize.com. Let's get to it, talk about the 2025 Cup Series changes. You, probably like everybody else, clocked out when that final checkered flag waved in Phoenix. Didn't really pay attention in November, December, January. Now it's time to get back on track. Well, I'll do the work for you like I always do and help you get up to speed really quick, just like with the spreadsheet. You can get the data, you can scrape the data, and you can do it for free, but it takes a lot of time. I do it for you. You pay me so that you can enjoy and have fun playing Fantasy NASCAR. No, by the way, the money goes to pay for my 6-year-old and all the crazy stuff that he needs. So you're helping the family. It's for a good cause. Feel good about your donation and feel good that you can just play the game and not have to worry about, I got to scrape some NASCAR data this week. All right, Zane Smith, first on our list of changes. Last year, not the greatest year for Spire. He was on loan from Front Row, where he won that Truck Series championship, moved up to Cup. Not really a spot for him, so he goes over on loan to Spire because they got a spot, and he's just kind of in a spot. Not heavily financed, not a lot of resources, just kind of out there. So I am happy to not worry about some of his performances from last year, but believe a lot in Zane Smith when he has good equipment in the Truck Series and in his few Xfinity Series races. He has raced well. The kid can drive. So now he goes back to Front Row. We know this is a team on the ascendance. I don't know how much better they'll get. I don't know if they'll ever be a top-tier team, but they are a top 15 team. They have made tremendous gains with their Penske Alliance. So I think there's a lot of good things headed forward for Zane Smith, but there could be hiccups. It may take a while. It may not happen in year one. He's going to partner with, obviously, a new team. He's going to work with a new crew chief and Ryan Bergenti, who was Todd Gilliland's crew chief at Front Row in the past, which Bergenti, pretty good. Not the greatest, but again, Todd Gilliland was a top 20 driver. I think we could expect top 20s, top 15s from Zane Smith. There may be some hiccups. But here's the thing, and this is about Zane Smith, but this is about all these young drivers. I really believe we're going to see kind of a change in NASCAR. We've already pretty much seen it, but look, talented young drivers are going to get better with reps. Smith is a part of that crew. But we've seen many young stars who've had success in the Xfinity Series fail when they get to the Cup Series. But this is a different era of NASCAR. And I believe that we're going to see these young stars be more successful than some of the failures in the past. And it's really just the nature of NASCAR at the moment. So when many young stars came through in the past, except for your super duper stars, which we'll talk about in a second, they would go to the Cup Series and they didn't have the equipment that could match a superstar driver. You're great in the Xfinity Series, top of your game. You go to the Cup Series. Now you got to race against better drivers and better equipment. So it makes a lot of sense why you would fail and not turn into the next Michael Jordan of racing. The disparity was just too much to overcome. You couldn't compete. Now it's different because a young star comes into the series, and with this Gen 7 car, there's not as much of a disparity in equipment. And you could argue that there's not as much disparity in talent because a lot of the superstars, although they do have an advantage in experience in the Gen 7 car, how much of an advantage can you really have in the way that this car drives? And they don't have a lot of experience. I mean, say you're coming up and Smoke's been racing in the Cup Series for 7 years. He's got 7 years of experience in that 950 horsepower car, and you got to compete with him? Yeah, good luck. But now it's not quite like that. A lot of the Cup Series superstars don't have as much as experience. They don't have the huge equipment advantage. So you could easily see the young stars emerge and become superstars. Now, I want to say emerge, not really say take over. We're not going to see someone come up and win 40 races seasons 3 through 6 like Jeff Gordon. That's not happening. And that's not happening because of the parity. There may be another driver who comes along that has all the talent of a Jeff Gordon. But again, the way the car drives, the way the disparity is working in this field, which is really not much. It's more parity than disparity. It's all pretty equitable. You could see these young drivers go toe to toe. Now, they're not going to win 40 races, but if Zane Smith wins 5 races in the next 4 years, then in that modern era that we are in, that's pretty much superstar level. It is very hard, unless you're Kyle Larson, to pile up race wins. And I think Zane Smith could get there. Absolutely. It's just the numbers are never going to be comparable to the 90s and 80s and 70s. Like, we're not winning 200 races like Petty. So you got to kind of reset your brain to, okay, what marks a superstar? It's just too hard to dominate in this package. It's too hard to dominate when NASCAR's constantly changing the car around every season, mid-season, or switching tracks. It's like an Etch-a-Sketch, constantly hitting reset. Anyone who builds up an advantage, it just doesn't last very long in this era. Remember, JGR jumped out of the gates. Oh, God, JGR is going to just run away with the 2024 season. Well, that didn't happen. So we'll see what happens. Excited for Zane Smith. Should be a pretty good year for him. Better at least than Spire. I want to make another note about that with the young drivers. Another thing that maybe you've already done this. If you haven't, you probably need to restructure the way that you think about driver development. In the past, drivers would go from the Xfinity Series, excel, move on to the Cup Series. That's not the case anymore. And the reason that's not the case is because in the past, the Xfinity stock car was the lighter, weaker, softer training wheels version of the Cup Series car, but it got you in the right direction. That's not the case anymore. The Xfinity Series stock car is more power, it's looser. Being able to drive that car does not prepare you for driving the Cup Series car. The Truck Series stock car prepares you for driving the Cup Series car. It's low horsepower, more grip, not as loose, not as wild, and thus anyone who has success probably in the Truck Series should jump to Cup rather than Truck, Xfinity, Cup. And we've kind of seen that play out. Being good in Xfinity does not necessarily translate into Cup anymore, whereas Truck should translate more into Cup. It's something to keep your eye on, and I'm sure the teams are aware of it, but you just have to take it from basic principles of how do these cars drive, how do these races play out, which is more parallel to a Cup Series race. Is it a Truck Series race or an Xfinity Series race? And I think it's obviously a Truck Series race where Zane Smith is a former champion. We saw Ross Chastain do really well in the Truck Series. He was fine in the Xfinity Series, but really was dominant in the Truck Series with pretty good equipment, but not the greatest. And then he steps into the Cup car and it's been pretty solid. Just a theory. I think that's a way to look at it. I could be wrong as always, but I would always keep my eye on the truck guys going to Cup. I make the strong argument that Austin Hill, because he's following the old developmental path, Truck, Xfinity, Cup, he hasn't been that great in Xfinity. Whereas I feel like he was a much more dominant force in the Truck Series. Same thing with Sheldon Creed. Now, Creed is his own beast, but both drivers have been just okay in the Xfinity Series. Good and good equipment, but theoretically, it may have made more sense for them to jump up to Cup, but obviously Austin Dillon's never going to get out of that 3. He's going to be in that 3 until he dies. But I think you can make a strong argument that if Austin Hill were in the 3 car, they would be winning races, and they would definitely be in the playoffs. Probably a stretch to say a championship contender, but a real threat from week to week. That's likely never going to happen. Okay, so continuing that theme, talking about drivers moving up, drivers changing around. We got Riley Herbst. And then also, again, with that theme of the Xfinity compared to Cup, Riley Herbst jumping into the 35, 23-11. Obviously, a sponsorship deal. He's got the Monster Energy ties because his family owns a bunch of gas stations in Las Vegas. You got sponsorship, you're always going to be around. And give him credit, though. Sure, he was given a lot and allowed to race and establish a career because of his sponsorship, but he has progressed and gotten better. But the problem is, so he finally has seemed to mastered the Xfinity Series stock car, or at least gotten pretty good at it. Well, guess what? All of that time that you spent learning the Xfinity car probably not going to help you all that much in the Cup Series stock car. I could be wrong. I think I'm going to be right on this one. Not really excited about the third 23-11 team. I'm never really super pumped when these teams expand because they don't necessarily always scale correctly. We have seen this over the last 20 years. If you've been with me playing fantasy NASCAR, when the teams expand, they don't scale correctly. They, adding a third team, you need to add third team resources. Usually what they say is, no, we can actually make this work with what we have and do spot here. And we ultimately see that all three teams suffer. Or what happens is two of the teams really struggle and one of the teams gets to keep all the resources that they've had. And we have seen the reverse be true when teams have downsized. It's not usually a permanent gain, but we have seen in the short run where teams that have taken the resources of three teams and then just focused them on two have a little bit of an immediate burst in speed and performance. Either way, I much more bullish on Zane Smith than I am on Riley Herbst in the 35 running for 23-11. A lot of reasons to doubt Riley Herbst. Really can't get on board. Talent-wise, not comparable. Experience-wise, not comparable. The team is going to be stretched a little bit more thin. It's a new team. A lot of doubts. But again, you're probably going to get him really cheap in fantasy NASCAR from week to week, so I wouldn't completely throw him away. It's going to be hard to roster him earlier in the season. Maybe he'll develop. But again, if you look at his development in truck and Xfinity, he is not a fast learner. Todd Gilliland, still with Front Row, but there's going to be some changes for old Gilly. Been a very solid driver in the Cup Series, top 20. As I mentioned, Bergenti no longer his crew chief, but his crew chief now is Chris Lawson, a guy that I really love as a crew chief. I should throw his stats up on the screen, but I don't really feel like doing that. But anyway, with Todd Gilliland, I can at least put Todd Gilliland visible on the screen, right? That wouldn't kill. Show you what Gilliland did last year. Top 20 driver. Now, you're saying, well, new crew chief, new changes. Well, not really, because Todd and Chris Lawson worked together back in 2016 and 17. That's when he was out there killing it in the K&N West Series, taking down championships, looked like he was going to be the next big phenom or superstar. Lawson's had success everywhere he has been. They also worked together 2020, 2021, Front Row Motorsports in the trucks, had a pretty good team, championship type contender, won a couple races. Lawson then cycles over and is crew chief for Zane Smith in the trucks. They do win a championship. Lawson, like I said, constantly has had success. And then we even saw last year when Lawson moved up to Rick Ware Racing, of all places, and really early in the season found a lot of success with Justin Haley. Surprised a lot of people. But it shouldn't be, because Lawson appears to be one of the better crew chiefs. Never really been given the greatest equipment. Again, he won a Truck Series championship. Now, it's going to be with Gilliland. I don't know how much better Gilliland's going to get, but I still believe that Gilliland's going to be that 15th, at least, to 20th place driver and flirt with a little bit more top 10s than you've seen in the past. Again, Front Row has plenty of speed. I like Gilly. I think I'm probably often too bullish on him. I'm biased. Always been rooting for the kid for, as long as we've been doing this thing, you and me. Speaking of doing this thing, remember, racefortheprize.com. That's where you can get access to the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet. Look, it's nothing special. Wait, you're trying to sell me something that's nothing special? Well, my kid's special, and when you donate money to the cause, you help him be more special. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate everybody helping out, pitching in. It goes a long way for all these years that you've been doing it, all the support. It's just, it means so much. Now, what is it? It's just a spreadsheet, and anyone can make it, and anyone can find the data out there for free, but you don't want to do that. Here's the simple pitch. You can make pizza, but yet you still order pizza. Because sometimes you don't feel like cooking. You just want to have fun. That's the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet. You can do it. You can make it. You can spend 30 minutes, an hour every day putting these things together, 5 hours a week. Or you can just throw a couple bucks to my kid's way, and I'll make a spreadsheet for you, and you can have a blast on the weekend. $20 for February, $250 for the season. It's greatly appreciated. I love your support. Thank you so much. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. Ty Dillon back in the series. Just don't expect much. Decent equipment this year. It's going to be better than the equipment he had with Petty GMS. Is it better than the equipment he had with the 13 Geico? I don't know. It's a colored car. It's fine. Not the greatest driver. I mean, you just go talent-wise and match him up with the rest of the field, and then you match him up with experience and the fact that he hasn't been in the cars as often as anyone else. I can't expect much more than a 25th place driver. Maybe he gets better. Again, the parity of the equipment's going to help, and Kolek has decent equipment, and he pretty much gets the car because of Kolek's connection with RCR. Seems like one of the situations that we've kind of grown accustomed to. You got to put somebody in this ride. You got a charter. You got connections. We'll just put Ty in there, and we got another car in the field. Get some cash. Get some paydays. That's what this feels like. Does not feel like a team that really is trying to develop anything or go for anything. You want to put Ty Dillon in the color car if you're trying to develop something for the future. You put Ty Dillon in the car because of connections. You need someone to hold the spot while you try to build something. Justin Haley with Spire. Not really great after the trade from Rick Ware. I mean, he wasn't great before. Maybe I'm giving Chris Lawson too much credit, but the expectations were pretty low. It was a Rick Ware car, and they exceeded expectations. Justin Haley exceeded expectations. Was he great? No. But if you're going to think that Zane Smith can do better, I still think that's a different conversation because Zane Smith and front row look like a team really moving forward. I often think Spire has too many, not forks in the fire. Why am I blanking on the word? Either way, they're doing too much. They got too many teams, too many series. They're involved in entertainment marketing, whereas front row is just out there racing. I think they're more about winning races and becoming a great team, whereas Spire wants to be a part of NASCAR. And I don't know if Haley's necessarily going to have super support. I don't know if Haley is the best driver either. I would clearly, if you had to ask me which one's going to have a better career given this moment, Zane Smith easily is the guy that I would get behind before Justin Haley. No knock on Justin Haley. Not a bad driver. But again, don't really love the Spire team overall and their, business model. It's going to have a new crew chief. Not super excited. SVG in the 88 for Trackhouse. Sure, at the road courses, go for it. And it makes sense with as many road courses that we have, and even with the plate races that we have, that you put SVG in the car. Sure, you're pretty much punting on the short tracks, and you're punting on the intermediate tracks, but it's not a crazy idea. If I'm looking for a driver, maybe looking on the cheap end, maybe looking for someone who's special and marketable, and given the schedule the way that it is, why not take a road racer? Why not take an international superstar? Especially if your team loves road course racing and then is expanding their road course racing into various different series. It's very good to keep that relationship. You look at what SVG did in the Xfinity series. He was great road courses and a non-factor for where else. And maybe he could develop. We did see AJ Allmendinger kind of follow, if AJ Allmendinger were to enter the series now, where there's a bunch of road courses, he would have a completely different career. He entered where he only had 2 road courses. He was always at a pretty strong disadvantage. Still had a pretty good career. As the schedule in NASCAR changed around to suit him, we saw AJ really promising to the guy that we thought he would be 20 years ago. Well, SVG gets to enter the sport where AJ wishes he could have, or where AJ entered at the end. And we respect AJ a lot. So we could very much put a lot of respect on SVG as well. Van Gisbergen. Gregson and Blickensdorfer. They did finish last year with top 20s in 7 of the last 9, jumping over to front row. I guess maybe is a step forward given the way that Stewart-Haas was at the end of the year in terms of resources and funding, or even the last couple years. It's very least not a step back. In the past, going from SHR to FRM would have been a step backwards. It's at least a lateral step, if not an improvement. Again, this goes to that Xfinity to Cup theory of, man, if you're good in Xfinity, that doesn't necessarily translate into the Cup Series. And even when Gragson was putting strong performances together in the Xfinity Series, that was a pretty watered down set of seasons. And even then, he wasn't the greatest. There were times he would flash brilliance, but also would make plenty of mistakes. You throw him into a Cup Series field, and I think a lot of times, talent-wise, he's outmatched. And he's not going to have the greatest equipment. There will be weekends where Gragson puts it all together, and Blickensderfer does too. But given Gregson's past and all the series, and even Blickensderfer's past, they're just not very consistent in their performances. They can show up and really have big performances, but and you can see right there with his stats from last season, like I just don't feel comfortable. There's going to be times, obviously, you're going to want to play him when he's affordable, but I don't know if he's that much better than Todd Gilliland. I don't know if he's going to be that much better than Zane Smith. Be interesting to see how that team works together, how it plays out. I think a lot of people, based on Gregson's brand and what he's done in the past, say, well, he's the top of the team. I don't think for a second that that's necessarily the case. I don't see Gilliland as a leader, but I could see Gilliland having a better season. I could even see Zane Smith having a better season. Josh Berry teaming up with Miles Stanley. When I see that name, I feel like, was he one of the Pilgrims at Plymouth? It was Miles Standish. Miles Stanley, was he the guard for Arizona back in the 90s? Hit that 3 in the tournament? No. Anyway, new crew chief in the series, new crew chief working with Berry. Going to old Woodbros, and Woodbros full of woes. Probably, if not now, time to write this team off. Just seemed to be out there. Even when Blaney was in the car, fully funded and financed, they were not that good of a team. And we have seen driver after driver jump into that car and sometimes have good performances and some do better than others. But ultimately, I just don't think the Wood brothers are a strong presence. Love Stuart, Virginia. Used to live right down the road from those folks. They will always have a soft spot in my heart and in your heart. Everyone loves the Wood Bros, but they're just not that competitive. And I think a strong argument can be made that Berry and his late model success doesn't necessarily prepare him for this car. Being strong in a late model car probably helps you out more with the Xfinity Series. And so I do love a lot of these late modelers. They're just pure racers jumping into the Xfinity Series right now, leapfrogging over truck, going right to a strong, loose stock car. Can't help but be excited about Zilich and Carson Quapple. I think it's an absolutely brilliant move by Junior Motorsports to say, these guys, the progression now is late model Xfinity, and it's truck to cup. I think he's identified that. I think he understands that. So Berry, and as we've seen, not a lot of success. Now, again, SHR wasn't in the best shape when Berry got that car, but at the same time, he's not in a lot of good shape this year. So if last year was a struggle with Rodney Childers, new crew chief, team that typically struggles, I just not very bullish on Josh Berry. Chase Briscoe jumping over to JGR. Yeah, probably going to be fine. Briscoe's got talent. Briscoe has checked every box he needs to check, been through plenty of different career changes, has faced adversity, moved from team to team, not necessarily because of his performance, just because of funding, financing, Ford affiliation. Either way, here he is, probably in the best spot he's ever been in. Crew Chief James Small. You have to be excited. Has shown a lot of promise at the short tracks, which he didn't do earlier in his career in the Xfinity car. But the car being what it is, he's found success in this car at short tracks. Really showing you the difference between the Xfinity and Cup. If it was 20 years ago, you're a good short track driver in the Xfinity Series. Those skills are going to translate over into the Cup Series. Now, Briscoe's terrible at short tracks in the Xfinity Series. Goes to Cup, take away the horsepower. Now he's in the game. And we know that JGR last year jumped out of the gates and really had a strong package in the short tracks. So really want to keep my eye on that. If I had to identify any tracks where I would expect Briscoe to immediately be a force, would be in the short track package. McDowell and Peterson are going to move over from front row, jump over to Spire. Like I said, I'm not inspired by Spire. Love what McDowell and Peterson have done, but how much of that was McDowell? How much of that was Peterson as crew chief? How much of that was Front Row Motorsports and their technical alliance with Penske? Cole Custer gets Aaron Kramer as his crew chief, previously the RFK engineer for Chris Buescher. He gets his first dance at being a crew chief. They do have a technical alliance, the factory Haas team, but to me it just seems like A, SHR was not really moving along too well in the past. B, it appears to be like, well, we don't want to get rid of all our charters. We got to throw something out there. Let's put Custer in the car and just see where we go with this. Haas, another team with a lot of different stakes in the fire. Is it stakes? Is that what I want to say? I don't know. You know, F1 team, all kinds of other stuff Haas is involved in. They just want to keep all their spots. They're not really focused on this series. One iota, Custer just filling a spot. And in reality, Custer hasn't been a dominant force in the Xfinity series the last couple of years. So hard to get really excited about him. And then to wrap up our last change for the Cup Series, Ryan Preece, changing teams again. I don't know how this guy keeps getting rides. Going to RFK. Got crew chief Derek Finley, who's been around forever. He used to be a crew chief back at the BK Racing days. Bankrupt BK Racing days. Not BK Brad Keselowski. We're talking the Burger King team. Remember them? That's Derek Finley. He's the crew chief. Where did they find this guy? Well, same thing you would say. Where did they find Ryan Preece? When I look at this team, again, it looks like, hey, we want to get a third charter. This is a business decision. We want to have 3 teams. It's not necessarily we want to win a championship. It's RFK trying to expand, trying to scale to the business model. We need a third driver. Preece is capable. We can get him cheap. We can get Finley cheap. We can get out there, and let's just go with this. You know, it doesn't look like you're trying to develop anything to win a championship when you're putting Ryan Preece in the car. It just doesn't. So, you know, I could probably put Preece ahead of Custer. But, you know, Preece, Barry, probably all in the same. I think McDowell probably could be a little bit better, but I think they're in that same bucket. Probably a slot ahead of Ty Dillon, obviously. But that's what we're looking at. So again, there's your changes. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you for joining me for the Fantasy NASCAR podcast. Again, if you go to racefortheprize.com, you can get access to the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet. Just simple PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, send the money my way. I share the sheets with you. You want to look at all the practice data, all the historical trends, all the current form, all the projections, the optimizers. Jump into some of the super private secret Zoom calls with this where we use the Fantasy NASCAR spreadsheet data and work with it in AI. That's going to be fun this year. Jumping into the AI lab. You sign up for the spreadsheet, send you the link, and we'll jump into some Zoom calls and work together on seeing how we can use the learning language models to help us make better predictions and analysis of races. Sounds exciting to me. But again, PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. $20 for February. That's Clash, the Duel, the Daytona races, the Atlanta races. Send it over. Share the sheet. You got it. Bob's your uncle. No problem. No worries. Super easy. Super fast. Again, has been stated on other podcasts where they don't want you to donate to my child. I know, God, can you stop using your child to try to make some money? No. I mean, I'm 100% honest. The only reason I'm doing this fantasy net spreadsheet anymore, been doing it for a decade. The only reason is just got to get more hustled money to support my family. Got a full-time job, several part-time jobs. I'm just out here trying to make ends meet. And if I can make a spreadsheet that can score a couple bucks to help score a couple chicken nuggets for my child on the plate, then I'm going to do it. So yeah, if there's other podcasts that say, well, you make it do it. Don't waste your time. Don't support him. Don't support his family. Don't support his family. You can get the spreadsheet on your stuff. You can. You can do it free. You can find the data for free, but you got to put in time and work. I'll put in that time and work for you. You can make a pizza or you can order a pizza. What are you going to do? Order the pizza. And hey, a lot of times when you order that pizza, it's from a small mom and pop shop, probably the kids cooking the pizza in the back. And you know, when you buy that extra large banana pepper and pepperoni with extra cheese, burnt crust, cracker crust, however you want it, you know it's going to a family. You know it's going to a good cause. So here it is. It's going to a good cause. Thank you for the support. I appreciate it as always. Trip to Life's fantastic.